had said earlier in the last video is I had bought this car pretty much sight unseen. I saw some pictures, but I flew into Vancouver, British Columbia to buy the car and then to drive it back 700 miles back to my shop. And so one thing that you'll discover if you do something like that is that you're going to find out exactly what that car is all about and what the issues are with that car if you jump in it sight unseen and just drive it home. So after 12 hours of driving, I found pretty quickly that there were a lot of issues with the car. The rear diff was whining, the rear diff was leaking, the rear diff was also clunking, which I had initially thought, well, it's probably the bushings, and that's from just having some experience with these cars. And then further to that, the suspension had some issues, as well as the brakes. The pads on the brakes were way too hard, and the brakes were squealing the entire way back. So although it was a very fun drive, the drive is for the bulk of it through the Rocky Mountains, and so it was a lot of fun. And I had actually purchased a second car when I was there, a white Evo 6, and a friend of mine was driving that as well. So driving two Evos through the Rocky Mountains for 700 miles isn't such a bad thing. However, there were a lot of issues with the cars. Fortunately, we didn't break down, we didn't run out of gas, which both probably we came very close to doing both of those. So as far as the suspension, when I got back to the shop, I had to take a look at the bushings, and most of the times if you have a rear diff clunk or thud, a lot of times it's the bushings that are located on the mustache bar. And so normally what you do is you take a look at those for tears. Normally you have to drop the rear diff to really assess those. This diff was coming out anyway because it had to be replaced, and so the mustache bar bushings are a very good bushing to do. Right now we're under the car. This is the Ayc Diff. We're going to be doing a full service on this diff. It's actually going to be a diff replacement as well. If you take a look over here, look at all that silicone. So this diff is grinding, it's making a bunch of noises. We have a few replacements here at the shop, so there's no real reason to get it rebuilt. We're gonna replace it with a known good working diff, and we're gonna service the Ayc system and do a proper flush. And this thing is leaking quite bad as well, so it'll be nice to get rid of it. Here's a better position that you guys can see the bushing and how badly it's damaged. And keep in mind, this is out of a 100,000 kilometer car, so it's like 60,000 miles. Look at that. Now another thing that I figured I'd put on this video, because I'm forever searching for part numbers for things. This is the Super Pro part. You can see the part number right there. And they refer to them as rear diff support bracket bushings. Now the Super Pro ones are a solid bushing inside a metal sleeve. There's some bushings from other companies that are split and they slide in on either side. The install is a lot easier, but I don't believe that they give the same kind of shall I say, suspension tightness that these would. These you actually have to put in with a press. I use a 20-ton press to put these in, and these are going to be better than the stock ones, whereas the split bushing without the metal sleeve, I just don't believe in them at all for this kind of application. I don't think they're a very good choice, so that's just my opinion. Okay, so here's the new bushing pressed in, and here's the old one here. What I did with this, I just cut it out. Well, cut the center out with just a regular utility knife, which takes no time. And then just put a little notch in the sleeve from the inside with a Sawzall, very carefully as to not, butcher the inside bore or anything like that. And what will happen is the sleeve will fold in on itself a little bit, and you can just pop it out with a hammer. It's not very difficult to do. A lot of guys have their own techniques. I've seen some people burn these out with a torch. I've seen some people just beat them out. Whatever works for you. You can throw it in a press and get a tube that's exactly this size and push it out as well. So there's the clean bore. I just ran over with a little bit of sandpaper just to clean it up a little bit. And then you have your final product here pressed in. And so these ones don't have any reliefs in them, so they're going to give a little bit of a stiffer ride. You'll feel a little bit more vibration, but you won't have your diff clunking around, and the transfer of power to the rear end will be a little bit more direct, so the car should feel a little bit snappier. And another thing here that needed some attention was the suspension and brakes. The suspension operated fine. It was riding on some older HKS Hypermax 3s, which were very, very good in their day. They were very expensive coilovers. There was nothing wrong with them, but we figured that we'd update this. And the idea here is to make this a nice street car. So what we went with was the HKS Hypermax GT4s. GT4 Max, I guess, is what they're called. And if you read some of the reviews of these, they're basically HKS's higher end coilover that has reasonable street manners. So that was something that we decided to throw in here. Now as well, the car had the original Brembo calipers, but they're running a very, very hard Project Mu carbon pad, and so they were rather noisy. The pads are very good and they're very aggressive, but they're more suited for the track. So we're going to be taking those out and throwing in something a little bit more street friendly. Okay, so today we took a look at some repairs that were done to the Tommi Mac Evo 6 so that we could effectively get some power down to that rear end. Those bushings, if they're in really bad shape, that rear end's going to be moving around a lot. That can cause some handling issues. That can also end up damaging axles and things like that. Now, if you do hear a thud or a thump out of the rear of your Evo 456 especially, try and get up under there and take a look with a flashlight at those bushings and see what kind of shape they're in. Probably 85% of the cars that I've gone through at my home shop here have had some bushing issues if those are the original bushings and they've never been touched before. So definitely take a look at those. So as far as the TME build, so we're going to take a look at the body of the Tommi Makinen edition, kind of how it was painted in Japan and what kind of process we used to take that car apart and change it back to the shade of white that it would have had at the factory. That car, and this is for Tommi Mac editions going forward, they're going to be worth more in their original color. I know there's a lot of people who go and they paint the cars red because that's the most desirable color, but sometime in the future that's going to be a thing of the past. There's only, like I said earlier in one of the earlier videos here, is that there's only about 3,000 of these JDM cars out there. How it was built from the factory, the paint codes on the chassis plate, you can't really hide that. So how it's built from the factory is really going to somewhat dictate the value of that car. And there's only so many red ones. I think there's about 600 that were ever built in red. and there's about 1,000 that were built in white. White was a very popular color at the time. So there was some suggestions from some friends of mine. Oh, you should paint it red. I don't think so. You know, my past, going way back, because I've worked on cars for over 25 years. I did some restoration work in the muscle car world. You don't paint a car the most popular color and expect that to carry over into the value of the car. That's just not a thing. So the JDM world is going to experience the same amount of collectability that the American muscle car market did. And that's something that people are going to eventually look at, and that's originality. How did that come from the factory? So thank you for watching today, and we'll see you on the next video. Thanks a lot.